Is the property a good investment for you or is it not? Hey, let's start with that loaded question today. Hey, this is Ed Drummond with Capstone Realty Professionals. And hey, this week I've had quite a few conversations that have led down that path and started that way. More common than not, I mean, a lot of people are reevaluating their options as to, hey, what does the market look like? Should people sell? Should they rent? What are the best options for them? Should they do long-term? Should they do short-term? You know, what model fits best for them? And I think it all leads back to that. When someone asks, and I get this question a lot, and for those of you that know me, for those of you that have gone through the process, I start with a spreadsheet that helps me in understanding, hey, does this property make sense for me? Even if it's not right now that it makes sense, does it make sense at some point in the future? And if there's a point in the future, how far out is that? What does that look like? What does my horizon look like for an exit? Or is this something that's just going to make sense long term? So, figuring those numbers out from the front end, that's a really personal experience. It's a personal question, right? All of us are in this game doing real estate investing in very similar yet very different ways. We're all doing it for different reasons. We all have our own motivations. We all have our own struggles with it or not, right? I know that, people ask me questions a lot about particular topics, particular things. And hey, I've been doing this a long time. And, my perspective on things can be very, very different than what, let's say, a new investor is looking at because I've seen some of the harder things. I've seen some of the challenges. I've also seen how good it can be. And I think with that, it puts my perspective into one that's uniquely my own. So when I get the question of, should I do this or should I not? The best thing that I can do when we're strategizing and figuring this out is I need to know every bit of information that I possibly can. So it starts with just a ton of questions. And some of the questions can be pretty opening, right? They could be very vulnerable places to go when it comes to talking about financials, talking about how'd you get the money to pay for this thing? Where is the money at now? What's your interest rate on this thing? Why did you lock in there? What is it? Blah, 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 right? I can go on for days, but all those things lead to me helping and making sure that first it helps me understand what's that person's risk tolerance might look like. Because I know my own, but again, when we're sitting in this space, I often don't know what somebody else's are. What's their timeline, right? I know what mine is. I know how much longer I want to keep everything, but how long does somebody else want to do that? I don't know unless I really ask. And by asking, I'm not saying how long are you going to keep the property. The question is, what's going to put you in a position to sell this thing? What's going to prevent you from wanting to hold this thing forever? Like all these different what if questions, because that's when we can really get to the nitty gritty of what we're really thinking. Oftentimes, pieces that we're not even aware of ourselves, right? Like I can ask these questions even to myself sometimes, and I'm not going to come up with the toughest ones that I ask our clients because I'm not sometimes being that real and raw with myself, right? So I do my best to be real and raw with y'all because that's my job, right? I want to make sure that if we're gonna get into this together, manage your property, that we're really in alignment and we know that we're in a place of trust and a place that we can move forward. Cool. Hey, so thanks for listening to me rant about that. If you came here for the numbers, here's where they're at. So this is an interesting week, and I want to give you something that's been interesting in December. Here are the numbers that we see from our Cromford report this week, and some information that they're providing shows us that the market is on a shift right now, more towards the seller side. Now, see all these green arrows? This means that all of these areas, as of December 29th, for the last month. So last month, here was their Cromford index. This month, here's what the Cromford index is. The Cromford index is basically a variable that basically takes what's the supply, what's the demand, how does that balance? Now, 100 is the balanced market. So if you look at some of these, you'll see Glendale, 100. That came up from 83, which was lower than 100, meaning it was a buyer's market last month. Now, it's come back up. Now it's at like a stable market. Now it's at a plateau. everything came up. Why is that? All right, so I looked more into the numbers, wanted to make more sense of it and figure out, okay, what are we really looking at here? And what we found looking at, and I think I told you all this over the last few weeks, everything that we had on the market at the beginning of November, I took off the market for sale because it just didn't make sense. And that's what we saw a lot of. So we saw a lot of properties that ended up really just coming off the market. What does sales look like? Okay, so check this out. I'm going to give you one here. When we look at what the active listing counts look like, what I just mentioned, when I look at active listing counts, look at this big dip throughout the month of from November, right? People started getting wind of it like we did. November, boom. And then everyone took their properties off the market, or a lot of them came off market. So as of December, right now, we're sitting at 16,000 properties roughly on the market that are not, under contract whatsoever. That says something, right? It's like, so the supply came down. But what is still down is the demand is still down. The supply came down so far that it's offset the shortage of demand. Now, it looks like demand has somewhat picked up a little bit, but not enough to really notice. What did affect the numbers this month was the supply just dropped off. Things are still selling, so you'll still see properties that are selling. Let me show you where we're at on that level and what that looks like as a comparison. So if you look at December right now, closings right now that we have in the greater Phoenix sales per month, it looks like we're at like 4,032, right? Which is considerably down from any other month that we've seen here since before 2019, right? So look at this month here. This was a January, more of a normal year. Things pick up. We've got the pretty solid bell curve here in Phoenix. And over the years, boom, 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 boom. Here was the weirdness of 2020. 2021 still trying to figure itself out. And then 2022, look at this huge drop off after June. So now we're at this trough. What's that going to look like? Who knows? I mean, realistically, we're probably going to see more inventory hit the market next year. We're seeing the demand definitely change. And, I think there are more options for people. We're seeing more buyers out there, more calls, honestly, on, what can people do? It's just making sure that affordability is, of course, top of mind, because that's the most important thing for most people right now. Cool. Have an amazing new year. After the first, I'll definitely be dropping some numbers as to Capstone and how we did this year. Definitely some interesting stats. Our management team definitely notched up the door count. Yet on the sales side, of course, as you can imagine, that definitely took more of a dip. Nothing's too substantial, but enough to be noticed. You know what I mean? But hey, looking forward to next year. 2023 is going to be pretty amazing. Some things that we have going on. If you haven't checked out our new website, the front page and a few other pages on our site have now been improved. We're doing some things there, some tweaks that we'll be doing here first quarter. You'll see some random updates populating there. And yeah, other things behind the scenes that are just going to help the team in making sure that they're more efficient and really just feel better in tackling the roles that they're in and doing an amazing job. Cool. Thank you so much. Have an amazing new year, and I look forward to seeing you next year.